Thanks, Felicia. Hey guys, happy Friday. Thanks for being here. Today's class is it's a really fun one. It's one of my favorites. I've been looking forward to teaching this one, but it's a simple design of knotted fringe earrings. And it's a good photo there. Here's the actual earring. It's a really simple idea of just making 4 strands of fringe and then looping them into what looks like a little intricate knot. It looks more intricate than it is, and you'll see as we go through building it, we're going to build it step by step, that it's just a matter of just looping it one time, but it just makes it a very intricate look. So I had a lot of fun with these, and I hope you guys will like it too. And it's pretty much versatile that you can change the counts and you can make it, your own spin. So I'll talk about that as we go through it. And we should have lots of time to explore ideas and ways that we could change it up. So thanks for being here again. And I thought I'd show you guys on the mat what they look like and what the materials are. And then I was going to switch to a brighter color so you can see the beads a little better. But what I'm showing here is the handout design, the one that's in the handout. And it uses the brown iris 10-0, which is one of my faves. It's got a sparkle to it and it's still earth tony. And then my favorite SuperDuo color, which is that 2-tone turquoise. It's got a little bit of gold going on, but it's also got like a matte kind of finish to it. So it's very earthy, very nice hue. And then amethyst colored bugles. So these are the size 3 Czech bugles. So just size 10-0 seed beads and size 3 bugles, and then SuperDuo. And you can do these in any colors that you like. Anything you have handy will work. At the end, we're going to need some ear wires to go on there.
Danielle.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Carmi. Something we just talked about before we let everyone in the class. Cynthia would love to know, how long are these earrings right now in your hand?
These are, let me get a little measure tool out. So these measure 4.5. And if you include the ear wire where it might, let me show it like that. So for example, when you're wearing it, they're going to hang just a hair under 5 inches. And so one thing we were talking about just before class is how every time I make these, depending on what mood I'm in, I end up making them a different length. And so you can absolutely change up the counts. And one of the best ways to do it is to make them, if you like the idea of the bugles lining up, meaning being in the same row, make it to this point right here, and then change up your counts below here. And I end up doing that a lot. Like I even on this one made one a little longer than the other because I think I was going for a more like tree branchy kind of look. So definitely you can stray from the pattern, absolutely, and make them to be any length that you'd like. The pattern up here, you could also change this. You would just want to do it with a little consistency. Like if you remove 2 from these sections and remove 2 from that way you would still have the symmetry there for the looping effect. But I do think that can be varied and it would still work just fine. But once you've made, 1 or 2 of them, I believe that it will create more ideas for how you can change it up, and you'll just be you'll be off and running with how to make many different spins. So yeah, but as designed here, 5 inches, roughly, give or take a few millimeters there. And yeah, so thread I'm using Wildfire. And so in a couple of our other classes, we've talked about Fringe and Wildfire and it being a little, too not wavy enough, right? Nymo maybe being a little better for the waviness, but on this design, because I'm going for that twig look, and because they're so long, that the Wildfire did fine for me. It's pretty it's got a lot of movement. See, it's wavy. But if you're somebody who is comfortable stitching with Nymo, you can try that too. Up here at the top, when you're getting the SuperDuos to stick together, the Wildfire was helpful to me here, getting that to be tighter. But repeat pass with Nymo would have the same effect. So I think any thread could work, but today I'm going to be working with the Wildfire 0.006. And I'm using a size 12 beading needle today, just because anytime I've got to wiggle through a SuperDuo, I like to have just a little more flexibility. So that's what I'm gonna be using. And then the other things you might want to have handy, I grabbed a pack of ear wires. You can use any ear wires you want. Whatever you've got will be just great. And then I've got some chain nose pliers that are for opening and closing the ear wire if needed, and some scissors. And I also use this to flatten my thread to help me thread my needle. All right, if there's any questions on materials, feel free to drop them in the chat. And I'll go ahead and get started with making our first earring. And so again, the colors I'm showing here are the ones from the handout, but today for our demo, I was thinking I'd change it up so that it's bright and you can see it. So I'm going to replace my 10-0 with bright orange, and I'm going to replace my amethyst bugles with these hot pink, and I'm going to replace my matte kind of Apollo turquoise with just a plain brighter turquoise. That's got, you know, it's just a little easier to see, I feel like, than this one. You know, it just pops a little more. So we'll go with those. And so for thread, the length you want to cut is about 70 inches or so. It gives you enough to weave in. And it also will give you a little bit of, you know, breathing room, like if you wanted to make your fringe a little longer, for example. So I did cut 70 inches and I just measured it against a yardstick. I just went twice over a yardstick, or you can just use 2 arm spans. That will also work for getting the length right. And again, I'm using this trick that I learned from Meredith at Beadle, where with Wildfire, if you take some pliers and you flatten the end, it gets really thin and it makes it a lot easier to get it through your needle. And so this pattern, we aren't calling it a beginner pattern, but I do think it's on the edge of being beginner friendly. All right, and so all I did there was I just brought the end of the Wildfire through and I folded it over. I pulled it down more than I usually do, you know, the usual 7 inches of folding it over. I folded it over more because this is a really long strand. So, and at first we just don't need that kind of length. Later, it'll be really handy to have it when we're working on the fringe, but for now, it's a lot of length to be pulling through, especially the first part of the design. So if you want, even pull down more than I did here. I think maybe that's a good idea. Like maybe 20 inches even, fold it over. And that seems like a lot, but I think it'll be handy for not having to just, you know, have your arm just going all over the place. Okay, and so here's some 10-0s. And SuperDuo beads. And I'll get the fringe out in a little bit. We don't need those just yet. The fringe, I mean the bugles. Okay, and so building the top part, we're gonna start with building this little segment here to get going. And you'll want to pick up a SuperDuo bead first. And this is definitely one of those patterns where the diagram can help because it's just the beginning part that I feel is not super intuitive. But I originally built them in a way that was a lot more like with a lot more thread passes traveling around. And then I simplified it once I'd gotten the design down packed. And I found this was like the shortest thread path for how to get this first section built. But our goal is to build this right now, which is just a little diamond with 2 shapes. And I found this to be the most expeditious way to just put it together, but it wasn't what I instantly stumbled to, and it wasn't how I originally built it. I mean, originally I just came through here and started making circles, right? But I ended up with a lot of thickness there. And so that's why this occurred to us thread path, which seems kind of weird, but it saves you passes through the SuperDuo. So that was part of the goal for doing that. But so it looks like this. You get your SuperDuo on there. And then you want to get 2 of the size 10 seed beads. And I'm leaving for a tail, I'm leaving a little bit of length, but not a lot, probably like, I don't know, I'm measuring, looks like 20 inches or so, because I can use one of those to make fringe later if I run out. And if not, I just have enough to weave in. So 15, 20 inches or so of a tail is great. You can do 7 inches as well. I think in the handout I wrote 7 because I did have enough to go and weave with my working thread all through my fringe. So totally up to you, but I think there's enough either way. Okay, and so I'm gonna go a little slow right here. This part, it can be, I feel like it's hard to visualize it, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna stack these like that, right? But it's not gonna feel like we're doing that. We're gonna string one and go through the open hole of the SuperDuo that we just had on first. Bring that down. And so it'll sit kind of like that. Get another SuperDuo. And just bring that one up to meet, sorry about that. Bring that one up to meet the other one. So it's gonna look like that. That's what we're going for. And now we're gonna turn and go through the open hole of that last SuperDuo that we just strung. So again, that's this one right here. Bring that through. Watching out for my tail. And now I need one more SuperDuo. And I'm going to go through the top hole of the next one. It's almost like our seaside peyote band that we did last August. Similar, it's almost like you're doing a peyote. And so there's that little diamond shape. And I'm going to take a quick break just to make sure everyone is okay. If not, I can go back through that. And I'm sure we'll have time to repeat it, but just double checking before I keep going. All right, it seems like everyone's got it. So I've got the diamond on here. And now what we want to do is just go ahead and put our size 10 seed beads on this side. So I'm going to pick up two size 10s. And then come down. I'm going through the open hole of that edgemost SuperDuo bead right there. And so there's that. And we need two more. And now what I'm going to do is go through all three SuperDuos. And so it's going to be in a straight line through outside, inside, and outside hole of those beads. When you do that and you pull it through, help these beads sit like that on the side. Just give them a little nudge so that they go over there. And now I'm going to turn and go down. I'm going to go down through all the ones on this, the holes on this side. So just like that. And pull tight. And I have one more to do. So I need two more size 10s. And I'm going to come up through the outside hole of the leftmost SuperDuo. And I'm just going to keep continuing up through the two 10s that are above it if I can. And it might not be able to get through all of them. I got through one. So I'm going to just go ahead and pull through and then just go through the next one. There we go. And so you should have something that looks like that. And what I'm doing right now is pulling on my tail, which is the side here, and my working threads here, and I'm just pulling to tighten it. So there's that first step. And that part is I feel like that's the trickiest thing, and the rest of it's just super easy. So let me just take a quick check-in with Carmi and make sure everyone in the chat is okay.
Danielle, so far so good. I'm just watching, a couple people have their cameras on, so I'm checking to see if they're able to follow along. Obviously, seeing this one more time is going to make even more sense. And a bunch of us are just watching today anyhow, so it's a good speed, Danielle.
Good speed? Okay. Should I continue to step 2 or maybe demo this one more time?
For that, I would love to ask Peggy. You're the one person I can see, and I know you're following along. Did you want to see Danielle do it a second time, or are you caught up with her? If you just say anything in the sidebar. Cindy looks good.
All right.
Great. And Danielle, just for if there's anybody here that's new, the recording will be available by Monday. Because our classes are on Friday, we never get access to them until Monday. So definitely relax and you will get the link to the recorded class by Monday. Peggy's caught up, Paula's caught up. So everyone's doing well.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we, again, this is the 2-hour class, so we will have time to start it again, and we can make the second earring today, even if you'd like to.
Let's do that, Danielle. I think you're on a good path. Keep going.
All right, so I'm going to start building the fringe, and this is where I'll be referring to my own notes, because as I mentioned earlier, you can change up these counts. So I just trying to remember what counts they were, because they were perfect for this design. So I'm just going to follow what I did here. But this is the fringe pattern for the edge pieces. And what you're seeing here are the 7 that are added here. So remember, there's already 2, right? There's the 2 that are here already. I'm going to flip it so it's kind of in the same frame. And so I'm going to string 7 and go through a SuperDuo. Then I'm going to string 9 and string another SuperDuo. And then from there, it's 11 and 13. So I just added 2 every time. So I think it was what I was trying to do. And then the bugles are in between each of those last 2 segments. You come back up through it, just like with all the fringe designs, and then we'll jump back in and we'll catch up back there. But so from here, first thing we want to do is just string 7 of our size 10 seed beads. And you guys will have to tell me if I jump in if I don't count right. I've been known to do that. So there's my 7. And now I need to SuperDuo a bead. And sometimes I just string them before bringing them down, but I'm going to take the time to bring them down so there's a good visual there to see how, where we are. So now I just need 9 S10s. Okay, got those, and I'm going to get another SuperDuo bead. So there's 7 and 9, and now I need 11 of the size 10 again. There's 5. And 5 more plus 1. And now I need my bugles. Let's get those bugles out. I'm starting to feel summer colors, so staring at them all, this was the one I grabbed. I thought that was just kind of my feeling for the day. So there's our bugle bead. Got that on there. And now I need 13. So I'm going to grab 2, 3, 4. Here's my first 5. There's 5 more. And 3. Bugle bead. Okay, and so before I go on, I always just check my counts. And only because if I don't match what I did on this side with the other side, it will be really apparent for the outside ones, because these are the ones that hold the knot. So I'm just going to come down and count 7, 9, 11, and the 13 are there. So I'm good there. Got one more size 10 bead and come all the way up through. Sometimes I get lucky and I can do this in 2 passes. Let's see. And what I'm doing down here, I just want to point out, I'm holding the strand that it's strung on to give it something to push against. I'm creating a little bit of tension. Helps me get through the beads. See more of a chance of getting through them. Looks like it's going to be a 3-pass day for that one. And I'm always trying to be careful not to miss any beads. All right, when you get back to the top, go ahead and continue through the two that we had that we were exiting from originally. So those bottom two size 10s. Excuse me. And when you get through those, it's time to tighten the fringe. So I'm right-handed, so I've gone ahead and turned my piece to kind of face where my right hand's here and my left is here. But whichever works for you is good. And then this is the bottom bead in our strand. I always kind of pinch it, just like between I kind of put it under my thumbnail really. And then take the working side with the needle and just pull. So that's my trick for perfect fringe tension. I'm really pulling pretty hard, but I've got my thumb here. So that little bit of space, just to get rid of it, just put your finger here and just gently pull. And that way you won't get the wavy. If you've ever seen fringe designs that are pulled too tight, they start to scrunch. That's just kind of my trick for making it not do that. So try it and see if you like it. And it sometimes helps my fringe game get a little better. All right, so there's my first strand. It's good. And now I want to travel around and get over here to my other side. So to do that, I'm going to go through the SuperDuo. And I'm going to come up through those two size 10 beads that are above that SuperDuo. There's 1 and 2. And now I'm going to create the part with an ear wire. And it's up to you if you want to add the ear wire now. I prefer to add it at the end because my ear wires are pretty easy to just kind of pull over the top. But if you're using a different kind of ear wire where you would prefer to string it now, you can do that now. Just put it in the middle. And I believe in the diagram, I show the counts for doing that, for getting that part done. So, but this is where we are now. And we just need to make that loop over the top. And so it says to string 3S10 in your ear wire and 3S10. I'm just going to go ahead and string 6 seed beads right now and put my ear wire on at the end. Just that next little set of directions there. But totally up to you which way you'd like to do that. I just find sometimes my ear wire gets in the way and my thread catches on it. So especially if I'm demoing, I like to just go straight with just the beads for now. And so I'm going to come over the top and go through these on the other side. And see, you'll get a little loop there at the top through the SuperDuo and then through both of the size 10s below. And so at this point, you should be exiting from the other side, and we're just going to repeat what we did before, but we're going to change it up in one way. When I string the first 7, instead of adding a new SuperDuo, I'm going to go through the outside hole of the one that's already here on the other strand. And I'm going to do that same thing on both of these. So here's 3, 4, 5, 6. There's my 7. And then just check how it's laying. Make sure that you feel good about how it looks. This is also the spot where I often catch my errors. If I've made a counting error in my first strand, it'll be really apparent to you here because it won't lay flat. And if you're getting that, just go ahead and just check your counts. And 2, 3, 4. Mine looks good. I think these beads over here might be a little puffier. For the most part, it's perfect. So I'm gonna leave that. I'm gonna get 9 now. So that was 7 here, and then we're gonna put 9 here. There's 3. Okay, there's my 9. And again, going through the outside hole of the next duo bead. There you go. All right, and so from here, it's a copy of what we did over here. We're going to do 11, bugle, 13, bugle. So I'm just going to be stringing these. There's that. 11 and a bugle. And so we're definitely going to have, we're so great at time. We're going to have time to make the second one. So all this we'll get to do it again. And I'm thinking we'll still even have time to change it up. So I love that part of these classes. I look forward to it. So we've got 3, 5. I'm going for 13 here. So there's 2, 3, 5. I need 5 more. And a bugle. And then I need 1 more size 10. And before I go back up through, I'm just going to look. They look good. Okay, and again, what I'm doing here is I'm holding the bottom of the strand, and then I'm going to go all the way back up through as far as I can get in one pass, and then let me try again. And I think I can get all the way up through these, so I'm going to keep trying to do that. All right, I went through the first 2. Those are the ones that were at the bottom of our original segment there. I'm going to pull tight. And I'm going to do that same thing I did before, where I kind of pinch the bottom bead and pull with the top strand with where my needle is. Just kind of bring those together. I'm going to give it one more look, make sure I'm happy with it. Yeah. Okay, and so from here, we need to do a little bit of traveling. We need to get to, we want to be exiting from these bottom ones here. And we're also going to take the opportunity to reinforce everything. So I'm going to go around all of these beads here at the top. And then I'm going to start making some turns through the SuperDuo. So we'll go really slow because it's the only part that's a little less intuitive is the traveling. So I'm just continuing up through the SuperDuo bead. Oop, I just got hooked on my camera. Sorry, guys. There we go. So I went through the SuperDuo and I went through the size 10 here. And I'm just going all the way around this top loop as best I can get through it. Sometimes I can get through more than a few. So we'll just keep going. And my tail's getting in the way. Let's get that out of the way. Okay, so I went all through all of those 10s, the ones that are just making up this top part. And I'm going to go through the SuperDuo, the outside hole here. All right, and so now what I'm going to do is turn and go through the inside hole of that same SuperDuo bead. And it's a little hard to get through it. So just wiggle your needle and kind of don't force it because you don't want to pierce your thread. And it's a little tight, but if possible, if you can get through the one above it, go for it, because then it'll save you having to wiggle in between those 2. So it's kind of worth doing it there rather than trying to go through 2 passes. Just makes it a little easier. Okay. And so if you're with me, you've gone through this loop outside part of the SuperDuo, and then you turned and came up through this one and this one. And now we're going to do the same thing going back down. And what I find when I'm trying to get through we're going to try to get through the outside, inside, and outside hole here to be exiting from this part right here. Getting through that can be tricky. So I like to wiggle the needle, seeing if I can get it to go through. I'm never really successful at getting it to go through all 3. I can usually just get it through the 2, which is totally fine. So get through those. And then just go ahead and try to get through the last one. And so our thread's exiting right here. And now we've got some new counts that we're going to have to take a quick look at in the handout. So there's a new fringe pattern. And the first one is kind of a doozy. But we got to count 29 S10. This is the one that's going to go all around. It's going to, and don't worry about weaving it right now. In the diagram, I showed it woven through in the, you know, behind and above, but don't worry about that. At this moment, just go ahead and string it. And we're going to do the fringe just like the normal way that we always do. And we're just going to string that pattern right there. Starting with those 29, which is going to take me a minute just to count, but I've got them here. And I usually just break up the number. You know, I just do the first number. And then I'll do it in counts of 10 after that. Okay. Yeah, I need 10 more. Okay. So there's my 29. I need a bugle. And now I need 13 of these S10 beads. There we go. And then another bugle after that. And so this is the super long strand. So it takes a minute. And after the bugle, there's 15 more of the S10. One more bugle. And then I need one more S10, which is my turning bead. So, and once you've got all of that on there, we're going to do the same thing we did before, where we have to go up through all of it. It's a really long strand, so just getting it even in the camera frame is going to be kind of tricky. But I've got the bottom bead here, and I'm just pinching it because I don't want to go through that. That's my stopper. And just as best you can, come up through all of them, trying not to miss any. I don't always see it when I've missed one, so I'm super careful. I can't see how many times I've made a really gorgeous fringe earring and been super excited about it and then realized that I didn't make it through all the beads. And at this point, I may need to release some of that extra, extra inches that I had folded over. There we go. Almost there. We're just going up through that whole strand. Okay. And when you get to the top, go through your SuperDuo bead. Try to just go through the one like that. And here's where I'm going to do that same trick again. I'm going to kind of pinch the bottom bead. And then I'm pulling with the working side up here. And there we go. So you should have this one, excuse me, one really long strand that's just kind of hanging out. And don't worry about it being knotted yet. We'll do that right at the end. But right now what I'm going to do is, remember when I folded over all that extra length? Now is the time where I need it. So I'm going to go ahead and slide my needle down. And bend it over and then go through. So we're exiting from the top of the SuperDuo bead. And what we want to do is turn and go down through the same bead on the other hole. So just like that. This is where we're exiting through. We're just going to turn and go that way. I'm loving this color, actually. It's kind of a cool discovery that I wouldn't have tried these colors if I wasn't trying to make the camera visible. And I'm so glad that I did. I'm going to need more 10s.
Danielle, Robin noticed that it looks like an Aztec color theme.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I'm feeling those kind of like tropical, like Mexico vacation vibes right now.
Wishful thinking.
I know, right? So true. And so all we have left to do is one more strand, and I'm just going to repeat all of these things. So this was 29, and that was, I believe that was 13. And then this one was 15. Those are the counts for the size 10 beads inside of those gaps there. So first one takes me a while. I'm not going to count out loud in case anyone else is trying to count. So I'll just do in my head kind of. Okay, so there's my first little section there, and I need a bugle bead. Bring that up. So there's my next section. That was the middle one, which is, and again, that's all written out right here. So I just did this one. I did my bugle, and now I'm going to do this next part. Here's my bugle. Let's see. All right. So one more traveling up through all the fringe. I'm going to turn it this way for my right-handedness. And skipping that last bead that we added, coming up through all of those fringe beads. Yeah, it takes a little while, but oh, uh-oh. That would have been bad. I didn't put that, I guess that bead just did not quite make it onto my needle. Well, so if this happens to you, I do have a trick. Maybe this is a great thing I can show you. I'm going to try to pull, I don't want to take my needle off. I could do it. That would be the smart thing. But if you're lazy like me and you want to break the rules a little bit, try doing it this way. So I'm pulling on, I got it to go in whole side first, not pointy side, so I don't puncture my thread. But if you just kind of pull like that, the Wildfire is forgiving enough that you can get your needle out backwards just by pulling it that way.
So Danielle, for anybody that wasn't looking at the screen, you just forgot the final stopper bead?
Yeah, I thought I picked it up. I think I just didn't make it onto the, and then I didn't notice. I'm glad I noticed it because it would have been kind of sad. It would have all fallen off the bottom. All right, so I'm skipping that last bead. That's important because otherwise your fringe just, it's, you know, it's not going to work. And you can also, if you wanted to put some weight on these, you could substitute this last bead for something else heavier, like a little fire polish or, you know, a little gem, crystal. All right, I'm almost to the top of this last little strand. It's just taking a minute. Okay, and when you get through your last bead, go ahead and go through the bottom SuperDuo again. And I'm going to do that same thing I did before, where I kind of hold the bottom bead and pull. And there we go. All right, and so we've pretty much got it. So from here, there's some kind of, I think there's tips and tricks for getting your thread woven in and even reinforcing this little top part. So we just did all that. And so what we're going to want to do is just bring each of the, we're going to do this after we weave in, but I want to make sure I explain. Sometimes I knot and sometimes I don't. I'm thinking I'd like to show where the knot is, just because there's not a lot of weaving in real estate here.
Danielle,
yeah.
Sorry, could you just backtrack and just clarify what you meant by adding weight when you changed that last bead?
Oh yeah, so we often, when we are talking about fringe, we had a really good conversation in one of our other classes where one of the students, I think it was Cindy, suggested using Nymo for your fringe and then Wildfire for building the top part. I didn't do that here because I felt that it was wavy enough even with the Wildfire, especially if you use that little tension trick, and also because it's going to be kind of knotting through. So this design, not so much, but a lot of times what you see in fringe, especially if you wanted to get the benefit of using a heavier, thicker thread like this for making things tight up here, is if you put some weight. So what I mean by weight is a bead that's heavy at the bottom. So like if you put a 4mm bead, even like a 3mm, if you have like a true to gemstone, I would personally put like a crystal bicone or something like that, or a little 4mm bicone at the bottom. So instead of the size 10 bead as your last bead, the one you use to turn, you could put one of those larger beads, and it would make these heavier when they hang. And I didn't do that here, but I certainly could have, and it would have been really cool. So that's why I just want to throw that out there in case anybody liked it and wanted to try it out. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to do a weaving in that brings me over here, and maybe do a knot with my tail. I don't usually knot, but this is so tiny and there's not a lot of places to go, right? So a knot might be helpful in this case. I think that one of the best ways to get there and give me a chance to reinforce might be to just do one more pass through here, if you can swing it. Now, if you find that this is just too tight and it's just not working out, you can always do half hitch knots in between any of the duo points by going down and up. I'll show that to you, but I'm going to show what I did on my original. So I went up through this one, and I went through this one, and I'm going to come over and go back down. I'm going to exit from the second one here, like that. And then turn, come up through here. This is the outside SuperDuo bead. Just going to turn and come up through that one. And get through as many of the 10s as you can. It's like I'm only going to get through one there. And I'm going to use this opportunity to reinforce this top loop one more time. So now I've got a good 3 passes through it, which is great. And then come down and stop at the 2 here. So I'm just going to go through these 2 and notice where my tail was. My tail was coming up out of that SuperDuo. So ideally, when you knot, you've got strands coming in at different directions from each other. So now I've got this one coming down, heading that way, and I've got this one coming up, heading this way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie a knot, and then I'm going to take my long working strand and come down here and trim it. And then I'm going to take this one and bring it up over here. And when I get over here, I'll show you a half hitch knot in case anyone wants to see that, and then we'll trim. So let's do our knot really quick. I know, guys, I'm nodding. All right, so here's one. And this is just a double shoelace knot, nothing special, just a regular, like I was tying my shoes, and do a double knot. Okay, and since I've already got my needle on my working strand, I'm going to work that one in first. So you always want to go through a bead after you've done a knot. Never want to cut right next to your knot because that will probably come undone. Get that tied. Wiggle through the SuperDuo and maybe another 10 or 2. I don't usually trim in the fringe. You're going to get your thread showing in the fringe if you do that. So cut either here or the next 10, but this is the greatest place as any. So I'm going to get my scissors. If you are a thread burner person, thread burner, do it right here. It's great. If you're using scissors, a trick for getting your thread to kind of pop back into the bead when you cut it is to push down with your scissors and pull up with your thread. And it actually does a pretty good job of hiding it in there. See, it's pretty good. And I'm going to borrow my needle from this one here. And then grab my chain nose pliers and flatten this one. This is the tail thread that I left in the beginning. Just flatten that. Makes it a lot easier to get it threaded on your needle. Just pulling it through just a little, fold it over, and I'm going to go up and around here. So now there's 4 passes through the top loop. And it's starting to get tight for me, so let's try to wiggle it there. And if you wanted to, you could just trim it right now. You don't have to go over the top, but I'm going to go over the top so I can show you a 1/2 inch knot in case anybody needs to see that for your weaving in purposes. Let's see if it'll let me get down through here. All right, so a 1/2 inch knot, what you would do is you would try to catch, so there's thread, you know, there's a thread running through here connecting our 10 to the SuperDuo, right? And so what I would do is come up under it. So I'm like in between right here, because my goal is to just hug a loop around the thread that's in there. And so I'm going to pull up a loop, try not to catch your fringe. It's going to be a little tricky, but you want to pull up a loop like that. Come back through that loop. And when you pull tight, guide that thread so that it just sits right above the SuperDuo. And that loop's going to pull tighter and tighter. And then your knot will just go right there. And when you pull tight, which I'll do this, like I'll wipe, like round the thread around to really give it a good pull. And it will take that knot and just push it kind of almost into the 10 bead. And take your needle, go through the SuperDuo bead, and that's probably as far as I'm going to get as far as getting through that SuperDuo bead any more times. This is why the weird circuitous thread path in the beginning was to save passes, because getting through the beads is really tough. But once you got through it, there you go. So I'm just going to trim that. It's pretty good. It's out from the SuperDuo there. And you could go through a 10 if you wanted to. Either is fine. Pushing down, pulling up. All right. So now the fun part, doing the little knot. So you've got all these cool strands. Everything's woven in. It's ready to go. And so the first thing you're going to want to do is take the outs. So it doesn't matter which one either. They're going to be, you can do whichever side first. It doesn't matter. But I took it and it went under from the inside part. So if you flip it over, it's already going under, right? So each one of these is going under this segment right here, right? So we've gone under. And now we want to go over. We want to go over this segment. So bringing this one over and down through it like that. Right? And the same thing with this other side. It's under that one, and then it's going to go over this one. Super cute. And you can just kind of straighten them out. And that's all there is to it. It looks way more intricate than it is. It's just a little over and under, and you're good. And sometimes I play with it to try to get, I want this strand to sit on this side. I'm just playing with it. And there. Looks like a little braid, kind of. And then if you did put weights at the bottom of your fringe, it would be even tighter up here. It would stay locked like that. But there it is. A sweet little earring. And then just to put the ear wire on, if you didn't do it at this step, which I usually don't, I would just get my ear wire. I have it out of the pack right here. It's all ready to go. And so this one's a little different. If you had a loop, what you'd want to do is you would take your loop and open it like this, right? With your chain nose, you would do like a lateral bend with a loop. Mine, it's already pretty open, but I'm going to open it just a little bit. Same practice there. And it's going to come around. And this earring does not have a front or a back, but if you had a favorite side, just go in the opposite direction and you'd link it. I'm going to put it in between the center two beads and then just laterally close it. And there's your earring. And any ear hook should work. Any loop or ear wire would be great. So there's, you can certainly make this pair in an hour. I think, well, we just made one in an hour, but if you're working at speed, at your desk, you could probably finish a whole pair in like an hour and 15 minutes or something like that, maybe hour and a half. But so yeah, super quick design. How's everybody doing? We're about 1 hour in.
Yes, Danielle, your timing is excellent. So sidebar is good. Everyone loves the simplicity of that knot. If you would have told me a million times, I never would have realized that's how you got it. So I actually needed the visual demonstration. I couldn't understand it from the diagram. So that was awesome.
Oh yeah, I struggled with the diagram. I was trying to figure out how to make it really stand out what was ahead and behind. And I think if I just done it like separately, I probably should have diagrammed it finished, So it's a good thought there. Yeah.
So what I'm going to recommend is, Danielle, you went through it quickly. Thank you. This is a great time to offer anyone a little comfort break. So if anyone needs a cup of water or a cup of tea, little bathroom break, we'll stop for 2 or 3 minutes and let everyone regroup. And then we're going to run through the earring a second time, a little bit quicker, so that there's time to do some designing at the end too.
Awesome. Okay.
Cindy said she's going to make the inside and outside fringes in different colors. She
That's
wants to be able to see that knot even more.
Oh, that's cool. I had another thought too. If you really wanted to get crazy, you could do another section of SuperDuo. So in order to do that, I'm just replacing these 2 bugles with a SuperDuo again, and you could loop it around again, like that.
Pat's going to try, she's going to make a second pair, and she's going to try it by weighting the bottom.
Yeah, I often wish I'd done certain things when I get to the classes. I'm like, oh, I wish I tried that. But I wish I'd weighted it and maybe done a 3rd segment. See how cool that would look. But you would need these to be just a smidge longer, and as well as these. But if you took those last 2 bugles and made them a SuperDuo, you'd have the same effect. It would just keep going. You could even do a bracelet like that. I had the idea of doing a whole bracelet where it just goes all the way around like that.
Also, Danielle, people noticed you're actually wearing a leather cuff today.
My friend made this. My friend Katie. It's like she used to have an Etsy store. She's in North Carolina, I think. And I knew her from my blog days, and she made this for me. It's for my boys, each of my little guys.
Danielle, what's happening every time we have these classes now is the original design is great. And I know people sign up to learn how to make the original design, but it's all the stuff we add on that becomes more exciting to everybody. So I haven't even made this pair yet, and I'm already planning to do a totally different version with the weighted bottom now.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I can find something real quick that I can use as weight. But I think I want to make the match to this one. So
Yes. No, you definitely make the second pair to match this, so you have a complete set of earrings.
yeah.
A couple of us already love these colors, so they'll match jewelry we've already made, because you've used these bright colors before and we've liked them.
I love these colors. Yeah, they're kind of like they definitely have that vacay spin to them.
Danielle, do you think this earring would look as well if you used all the same color palette? Could this all be done in
Cool.
white, all be done in gold?
I would love to see it in all just a monochromatic palette, because then it would really look like things are just looping around like crazy. Like imagine if this would look like an actual knot if it was orange, or if it was, yeah, like I like the idea of one that's all white. It would look like seashell and you could put little shells at the bottom.
Oh,
It would look like a
awesome.
mermaid.
Pat's wondering about dangling a SuperDuo at the bottom.
Oh yeah, yeah, that would be cute. That would work great. You could even put if you had a jump ring that would fit through the bottom hole, you could even charm the bottom. Kind of fun.
Charms on the bottom.
Oh, yeah, even without a SuperDuo, just go straight through a jump ring or a closed charm. They have a bunch of the like little charms at Michael's. It'd be fun to play with that too. Little stars, maybe.
Yes. Okay, well, I think you're good to go. We have some friends that did get to the class late today, so they missed the first important part. So
Yeah,
Danielle, if you would take your time during that part, because I think that's if you learn how to do the top, everything else will make sense.
Yeah, I feel like showing that is the key. And then stringing the fringe takes forever, but it's kind of a no-brainer. Just it's making sure the counts make sense as you're going.
Yes.
So I'll breeze through those and then show the end, and then how to how to meet your thread when you're weaving in, because I thought that was kind of a cool add too. So I'm going to get some new thread, and in case anyone missed it, I am using Wildfire, and we had a little discussion about thread, but this is the one I'm going with right now is 0.06. But you can use other threads if you prefer other threads, and I think it will work just fine. You'll want to cut about 70 inches. And I haven't been leaving a tail in my designs much more than like 7 to 10 inches, but if you wanted to, you could. And you can use one of those to make to make one of the fringes, if that helps. I know that's a great tip that I picked up from another designer, so that you don't have to pull so many, arm lengths of thread through. But another thing you can do is you can take it and bend a lot more down on the needle. So that was the kind of the approach I went with on the last one. But I just always throw that out there because there's more than one way to get that to
Danielle,
work.
I think everyone probably appreciated being able to do this without changing the thread. So the 70 inches are a good idea.
Yeah, I thought it was the fastest way. So that's kind of what I went with. But definitely if you're worried about getting knots and stuff, and that's when you're not working with Wildfire. If you are working with like a Nymo, you probably would appreciate not having as many passes because it starts to shred as you're, so either way works really great. But if you're doing it like I'm about to do it with the Wildfire, normally we would bend it over here at like the 7-inch mark, but because we're working with this 70 inches, I keep going, maybe even pull 20 inches down on the, on the needle here and fold it over. So we're still working it on a single strand. It's just, I've got a lot folded over so that I'm not pulling it really crazy through and hitting my camera and doing all that stuff, right? So again, that's 70 inches and I folded over 20 on my needle. Okay, and so I'm going to just show the diagram one more time because I think it helps to see what we're doing. We're building the top segment first, which is the diamond and those little square of corners with those size 10 seed beads. And the thread path here, it seems a little weird, but it's the most expeditious way to get it going with the least number of passes through those beads, which you will appreciate later at the end. But we're going to just come up through a SuperDuo and string 2 10s. And then we're going to go through some duos and spin around. So I'll go real slow through this part and holler if I'm going too fast. And so we're just going to pick up one SuperDuo bead. Bring that down. And again, totally up to you. I'm probably going to leave just, enough tail to weave in, not a lot for me, but if you're doing it a different way with a longer strand here, then leave as much as you're comfortable with, and you can use that later to do another strand of fringe. But I'm just doing about 7 to 10 inches in this case. And then you'll want to string 2 size 10s. So far, SuperDuo and 2 size 10s. And the reason this is kind of weird is because the way you string it, it's not visually going to make sense, but you pick up a SuperDuo and go down through the next one. The outside hole of the first one. And really what we're doing is we're going to pick up the new SuperDuo bead, and we're going to go through the open hole of the first one that we strung, and it's going to sit like that, right? Then we're going to string another one. And they're going to kind of hug like that. So here's how that looks. One, go through that open hole of the first one we strung. And so it'll sit kind of like that. Pick up another one. Bring it up so that it meets the former, like that. And then turn and come through that, the outside hole of that last duo bead that you strung. And it's all going to be loose and wonky. Just pinch it, hold it in place. And when you get to this step, you can tighten everything up by pinching this bottom SuperDuo bead here. Just pull, and then grab the tail over here and pull. And you'll get something that looks like that. And then you just need one more SuperDuo here. And come up through the opening there of the top SuperDuo bead. So that's the open hole of the top one. And pull through. And you get the diamond. There's the diamond shape. Everything's still pretty loose. Like you can even get the tail to move here. So stuff's pretty loose. Don't worry about that too much. And there's 2 more size 10, and go down through the outside hole of the rightmost SuperDuo there. Down through there. Okay, and so now we just need to add 2 more size 10. And this time I'm going to go through all 3 SuperDuos, and I'm going to go through the outside right side hole of the bottom one, and then the inside hole of the one above it, and continue through the outside hole of the one above that. So all 3 going through like that. And this will be the first, part in the design where it'll start to feel tight, where the thread won't move around on you anymore. You'll get to that spot. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing I did on the side. I'm just going to go down through all 3 again on the other side. So all 3 of those right there. And then come down. And I need to add my last little side to this kind of squarish shape there. Tighten everything up. Here's 2 more size 10 beads. And then come up through the outside hole of that leftmost duo bead. And the goal is to continue through both of the 10s above it. I only got through 1 on that pass, so just going to pull tight. Continue through this one. Okay, when you get there, here's the tail and the working thread. Go ahead and just give that a tug. And there you go. That's the first section. It's all ready. And then we're going to just start building our fringe now. This will be the bottom part where we build the fringe, and this will be where the loop is up here. We're just going to go right into building that first fringe strand. from that segment. How's everyone feel about that segment?
I think we're good, Danielle.
Okay, awesome.
You know, Danielle, when I watch you build these segments, the design is awesome. I almost want you to just keep going with this design. Never mind the fringe.
Oh
This,
yeah,
this already is an amazing little something we could work with.
I think so too. In fact, the way it's written in the pattern, you could keep following it. You could just start building the next one, right? I'll take this off, but you could just start building the next segment now. And then you'd have a whole row of all these segments. And you could come through it later with like another couple of strands and loop through.
Yeah, we're going to have to come back to this design.
Oh yeah, that's one of the cool things about bead weaving is you can take one little, if this was music, you'd call it a riff. It's like, you know, it's one little kernel piece of something and you could turn it into a completely different song, right?
Exactly. Danielle, I want to let you know that the second demonstration is great. Kylie now knows where she went wrong.
Oh, good. Oh, I'm glad, Kylie. Yeah, I'm sorry if you were suffering through the first round there. It's definitely this part is the only part that I feel like needed a little bit more instruction. And I think it's the circuitous way that that it's begun. But you'll see as we get going, the reason I didn't just build the diamond by itself, which would have made more sense visually, is because it made you have lots of extra passes through those SuperDuo beads. And I was having a really hard time getting my needle through it when I did it that way the first time. So I can't remember the originals that I built, the ones that I sent up to Toronto for photography, they were like that. And you could see there was like so much thicknesses going here. Whereas these are just a little easier to get through. So, but definitely, if once you've got this part, you got it. So I'm really glad to hear that. And I've got the first two here. So I was going to show the diagram one more time just to explain where I'm going next. I'm going to start building this fringe pattern here. It's the first thing you see under step 2. So it's building the 7, and those 7 are placed here. Keeping in mind you've already got 2 on there, right? So those 7 are built in addition to that. So it's really a total of 9 if you add that up. So it's just 7 and then a duo, and then there's 9 and a duo, 11 and 13. So just each one is adding 2. So that's what we're going to do here. And I'm just going to pick up 7. So there's that. And then you want to grab a duo bead. And now I need 9. And another duo. And I'm just going to check my counts really quick. I tend to miscount on my lives. Okay, and so now I need another section with 11, and instead of a SuperDuo at the bottom, it's going to be Bugle. So there's that. Okay. Bugle bead, slide that there. And now I need 13. There we go. One more bugle bead. All right, once you've got the last bugle on there, grab one more of the size 10 beads, and this is what is going to be our turning bead. Bring that on. And just slide it down a little bit because we're not going to go through that one, but we're going to go through all the beads above it that we just strung. Just headed back up through all of those in the opposite direction. And keep going. All right. And so one of the things I was showing earlier for Fringe is if you pinch that bottom bead and then just pull that. I've got a really long working strand at the moment, but I'm pulling with the long side and kind of pinching the bottom here off camera. As I get closer, you'll see it. And then when you get to that last part, you're gonna have a little gap there. So go ahead and just hold it and just gently pull. And there you go. You get a pretty good tension there for your fringe. Okay, so now we need to, we're gonna just travel around here and go to the other side while adding a loop for the ear wire. So you can decide at this spot if you want to add your ear wire now. And earlier I showed not using the ear wire. I'll put it on now, even though it's kind of a risk for it tangling a little bit. But in case anyone wants to see that, if you're using one where you don't have the kind of loop where you can put it on at the end, I'm going to kind of pre-close mine. Go. But any kind of ear wire should be good. So I'm setting that aside for now. From where I am here, I need to keep going. I need to come up through the SuperDuo's outside hole and those next two size 10s. Loop around. And I'm adding the ear wires, so I'm going to go ahead and do 3 and ear wire. And 3 more size 10s. And now I'm going to go over here through the 10s on the other side. So we exit from this side and we're just going to come over and go through this side. And there's it with the ear wire all ready to go. Come down through the SuperDuo and those 2 10s below it. And once you got that, we're going to repeat the pattern that we did before, with the exception of we're not going to add a new SuperDuo. We're going to use the hole that's already here. So let's start with our 7. Let me go through this one here. Okay, and now I need 9. And going through the open hole of that next SuperDuo bead. I'm going a little faster than before, so just give me a shout if it's confusing at all. I need 11 now. There's 11, and now I need a bugle. Bugle bead. And 13. Okay, that's the last section there, and I need another bugle, another size 10. And it's time to travel up through all that fringe. So skipping that last bead, coming up through all of those again. If you have a looming needle, that can really help for this part. It's not good for getting through here when you get to the tops. You'd be switching them back and forth, but the fringe is definitely easier with a looming needle, I feel like. Okay, just one more little segment here. And when you get to the top, go ahead and just go through those first 2 that are sitting below your SuperDuo bead. Those were the first 2 10s that, you know, they're part of the original square. Let's go through those. And I'm just going to make that fringe tension thing go again. There we go. Okay, traveling around, I want to be exiting from the center. But the first thing I'm going to do is reinforce my loop. And I'm just going to show that really quick because I know it's a little bit tricky, but we just finished the fringe, right? And we're just continuing that. We're just going to go all the way around right there. So that's where we are right now. Okay, continue through that SuperDuo bead. And I've noticed that it gets really tricky not to catch your fringe. So just watch for that. Okay, so I'm through the SuperDuo. And somehow I need to travel so that I'm exiting from these center ones. And I'm going to show the diagram really quick so it's easier to see the thread path that way. But what we're going to do is from where we are here, we went around the top of the ear wire, right? And now we've just gone through that SuperDuo bead. And we're going to turn and go through the inside hole of that same SuperDuo that we're exiting, come up through the one above it, use it to loop around and just continue through 1, 2, 3 here. And then we're going to start our fringe on that side. So it's a little bit tricky path, but you can do it. You can get through. You just have to kind of wiggle the needle a little bit. I usually struggle more on this side than the other one for some reason. Don't know why. But there I got through both of those. Just going to watch out for my ear wire here a little bit. My definite preference is to not put it on at the beginning, but I just wanted you guys to be able to see that part now. And I can only get through 2 usually on this side. So what I'm doing here again is we're stepping out and going over and down through that same SuperDuo bead, that other hole. And usually I could just get through 2. I'm going to have to get through this one, but let's go ahead and pull that. Watch out for that ear wire. There it goes. Okay. And straight through this one. Okay. And so now we have a new fringe pattern to look at. It starts with 29 beads. You'll get to where you memorize it eventually. I still have to look, but again, these counts can be changed up too. So don't feel like you're stuck with these counts, but the ones that we've been using are here in the bottom of that first paragraph on the 3rd page. So we start with the 29, bugle 13, bugle 15. And so that's what I'm going to do. And I'll count, I won't count out loud. So in case anyone else is trying to count too, I know that can be super frustrating. That. All right. And a cool way to check your counts is that once you've got it laid out, you can just segment it, right? So I know that's good. And good. So I have a total of 29. And I'm going to do a bugle bead. There we go. And let's see, 13 more. Another bugle. last but not least, we need 15 more and then another bugle. So I'm just going to grab that last little segment there. Okay, last bugle bead. One more size 10 for our turn. And now the tricky part of getting through all this fringe. So let's see, I'm just going to kind of turn it. The longer ones are definitely trickier for me. Remember to slide that last bead down. And I'm just going to start going through, trying not to miss any. I'm just going to keep going through all of those. Okay, and when you get to the very last one, go ahead and keep going through your SuperDuo bead. Go through that same hole the thread's exiting. Just keep going through the SuperDuo. And then last but not least, I'm going to pinch the bottom bead and pull. Get that tension pretty good. One last little. All right. And a super easy turn here. We're exiting from the top hole of that SuperDuo, and we just want to come and go down through the adjacent one. There you go. All right, same thing again, lots of counting. I even need to get out more beads. This is a bead hungry design. So let's get a few more and we're almost there. Okay, and that first count's kind of a doozy. It's 29 beads. All right, and a bugle. Okay, and then we need 13. Another bugle bead. Okay, last section. Just need 15. Last bugle and one more size 10 and one more trip up through a really long strand of fringe. And then we're really close to being all set. So let's see, so let's skip that last bead. All the way up. The strand is so long that I just kind of have to work it in different sections. All right, and again, when you get to your SuperDuo, go ahead and go through it. And let's get that fringe tight. The bottom bead is just kind of hanging off camera. Sorry about that. I am pinching the bottom bead just like this in between my fingers, and off camera, I'm just pulling. And then I'm pulling the working strand too. So you get that tight little lock there. And then just to get rid of that little gap right here, it's going to give it a little gentle tug. And there it is, all set. Okay, so real quick, I want to show that weaving in trick again, because I felt like it was kind of cool. But it's basically what we want to do is kind of, we're going to try to get ourselves to where we can go and meet this one. And so what we're going to do is just kind of go around it, but you can weave in any way you like. And you can also, if you wanted to, just like start doing knots here, you totally could do that if you want. But I'm going to follow a thread path that was similar to the one we did when we were adding, trying to get to the center, right? We're just going to go continue through the next two SuperDuo beads. And, you know, you'll just be going through the inside hole and then the outside hole there. And there's a lot of strands and ear wire going on, so just go slow. And once you get through here, you'll be at the top, and go ahead and just go down through that same bead other side. If you can get through the one below it, go for it. So we're going to go through both of those two right there. So outside hole of the top one and inside hole of the next one down. Watching out for that ear wire. And so from where I am here, I'm going to come up through the outside hole of the edgemost duo, and I'm going to make a trip around as a chance to reinforce my loop. Going through my ear wire too. I feel like it's a little trickier with the ear wire, but you can do it. It works. Through the next two tens here, and then I have met my tail. And my working thread's headed that way. My tail is heading north and my working thread's heading south, basically. So, oops, sorry, I hit the camera there. This is a good place to knot because you've got strands going in different directions. And you can get the double knot going. So just like a shoelace knot, like you're tying your shoes, just want to go and tie one knot. Just that. And one more. Okay. So that's what I've been doing for the samples. That seems like the kind of easiest way to get it to work. And then what I do is with the side that I still have my needle on, so my working side, I'm going to go ahead and keep going through the SuperDuo bead. And if I get through a bead below it, I'll go for that too. I always tend to make it through the 10 on that side. I don't know why, but got through that 10. If it's tight, you can use your pliers to help you get it to move through. Okay. And you can go ahead and trim your working thread at this spot if you like to, trim or burn it. And same trick here. Just going to push down, pull up. And I'm going to take my needle off and use it again. I actually had a lot of thread left for some reason on this one. I must have cut more than 70. Flattening the end of my tail thread so I can get it on the needle really good. Check out what I did. This was a brand new needle before class. Look what I did to it. it's getting through those SuperDuos that it's a needle attrition. There you go. I'm bending that over a little. Okay, so this one I'm going to take over the loop for an extra reinforcement there. There's a bar next to me that my camera's on, and that's what you're hearing. I keep hitting it. I don't know why. Got it out for my camera today. And with the ear wire, just making sure I don't hook the ear wire as I'm going through my loop. Okay. Down through here. And you could do a 1/2 inch knot if you want to. I feel like I'm going to go through the duo and then do it down here. I can get through the duo bead. Just be gentle. If it's not letting you go through, it's probably trying to puncture threads. So just be careful with that. If you decided you're not down here, I'm going to knot below the SuperDuo this time. Last time I knotted above it. And just for some reason I'm below it this time, but you just catch, for a half inch knot, you want to catch the thread by just coming up next to it. So to show you what I'm doing, the thread that's coming out of this duo and going into the 10, I'm just going to try to hug it by coming up from the inside. I'm going to pull up a loop, come through my loop, and try to guide that knot so it sits right there. I'm going to spin it around my finger and give it a good pull. So that knot's hidden, and I'm just going to go through these 10s. And then again, I don't trim inside my fringe. These are the 10, these two right here are part of the original square when we started. And I'm going to go ahead and trim there. Push down, pull up. And we're all set except for the folding part, which is my favorite part. Okay, and so what you'll automatically notice is I put my ear wire on so that the forward part is facing where my fringe is already at the back. That was totally accidental. If you find yourself not in that spot, you can just bring them through here so that they be in the right spot, right? But you want to have the longer strand behind the shorter strands. So bring those strands behind and the shorter ones in front. So laying flat, it will look like this. Here's my short strands, my long strands, and they're in the back here. Okay, and all you got to do, super easy, is just bring each one over this segment here through the center. So I'm just going to go right through this. There we go. There's one side. Same thing we did on that side, we're going to do over here. We're going to bring this long strand over the center one. Right through there. And it's all done. I feel like these are, you know, they're super quick. They're not quite instant, but they're quick enough to be considered a fast make, I would say. And now we have a whole earrings. I don't think I've ever finished like both earrings in a class before. This is a first. Like I could go put these on right now and just be like ready for my weekend. Pretty fun.
Danielle, that was amazing. So a sidebar has been great. And I think the second set, being able to make that second earring really made the pattern make sense to all of us. And
Awesome.
as Seema really said, it is really, really pretty.
Thank you. Thanks,
We have a little bit of time left, and the one thing I was hoping you could help address is how would someone what's the best way to make this shorter or longer? So would you have the numbers go up or down uniformly, like take 2 beads off every time or add 3 beads? Like what's the best way to do that?
I would break it into segments. So when I was playing with getting the knotting to look cool, I paid extra attention to the counts above the SuperDuos. And the reason I did that is because they kind of match each other for what can reach around well. So that particularly that 29 was a really good match for the numbers that, because the 29 beads on the long center strands, that's the one that has to do all the looping around under and over. So that count, I would keep that one the same. But if you wanted to make it shorter or longer, vary your counts below the SuperDuos and for the center strands below this first bugle. So I think the best way to explain that would be to show it without it knotted. Let me pull this one out. So what I would do if I was going to change my counts, I would keep this one the same as the 7, right? I would keep this one the same as I believe that was a 9. So this one and this one, I'd keep those the same and then change these ones as much as you want. because these don't matter. They don't have to do anything. They're decorative at this point here at the bottom.
That's a good point. They are
Yeah.
decorative.
And then for your long strands, keep the 29 and then do the bugle and then go crazy here. Do whatever you want. That's if you want it to do the knot exactly like it looks here. But you could change these counts. If you adjusted these, you would just need to adjust this to kind of have the length you need to look the way you want it to. But there's definitely the possibility to change that too and have it look great. You just have to play. It would be a little more finicky. You'd have to play with it, but totally possible to do it.
I do know Kylie is actually trying it today with 8/0 beads.
Oh, wow. That sounds good.
So it'll be interesting to see how the design works with a bigger bead.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to see that.
So I'm hoping she will post those. Did
Yeah.
anyone else have any questions? I monitored the sidebar. I'm looking if anyone had any questions.
Yeah, one of the things, well, I was having another thought too about if you wanted to make this either longer or even a bracelet. This is something that I'm really interested in doing just because I think it would be kind of neat. I'd have to figure out how to finish it on the other side because at one point you'd have to bring it back together, right? And you could do that with another diamond. But in theory, you could just keep going in infinity, right? Because if you replace each of these bugles with SuperDuos in the center strands, you can wrap around and around. Like you can just keep going over, under, over, under, over, under, and you could just keep going as a bracelet. Like you could make a necklace. You could, yeah. When you get to the other side, you can bring them together somehow. Which I think creating another little diamond and doing a loop and then having your clasp instead of an ear wire would be the way to go.
And Danielle, will you show your the one you just made versus your original design?
Yeah, yeah. So this was the original. And a keen eye may notice that I did not get my counts right on them. This one's longer, see? I messed up. But I was done at the time and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna live with it. So this one is the colors that are in the handout. And if anyone is loving this colorway, I can go ahead and grab the tubes again and tell you what those are. Because I actually really love this colorway.
Those are great colors.
I like it in yellow too. You know, like a yellow would be really pretty. Let me see. Let's look at.
We just had a question from Michelle about different duo beads. And I want to let Michelle know that that is the SuperDuo bead that's in Michael's is the only size that we have to work with. So if you did use a bigger bead, definitely do it with the SuperDuo.
Yeah, and I feel like, you know, because for John Bead, we're doing lots of work with other 2-hole beads. And I have not tested this design with the other 2-hole beads, but I don't see why it wouldn't work. I can't think of a reason why it wouldn't. If you wanted to switch from a 10 to an 11-0, meaning swap this guy down to an 11, if you're working with, like, say, a twin, this will work fine. I feel like it would work anyway, even if you didn't. So I think it's just, there's enough, I think it's forgiving. This little part right here is pretty forgiving. Like it would still work for that. And again, these colors, if you like this orange pop of orange here, this is just a plain turquoise, which is a really standard color. It's the opaque, it's got a little bit of a luster to it, which I really like. And then this is just the orange, the pumpkin orange. I think it's actually called pumpkin pie. And then last but not least, I used our hot pink. They say purple, and that's going to be what you'd see on the label, but to my eye, they really do look like hot pink. But they could, you know, be like a fuchsia violet maybe. And that's opposed to the original colorway, which is the one, those skis are in the handout, but they are these guys right here. Amethyst, brown iris, and then I think this is called Turquoise Apollo. If I remember correctly, that's a really pretty one. Yeah, and then ear wires, sky's the limit on that. Different thread, you can totally do different thread. That would all be great. And let's see, gosh, what else? One thing I haven't done that I really wanted to try was I thought about making the diamond bigger, because this is just peyote right here. And you could make that instead of 4, you could make it larger. So start it where the center is 3 out and there's 2 on top of it and then 1 on top of that, right? So 1, 2, 3 SuperDuos, 2 on top, 1 on top, 2 below, 1 below, and you'd get a larger triangle and you'd have more fringe strands. You'd have an extra 2 fringe strands coming out of there. So that could be really fun to play with too.
That's a great idea. I think I'm going to try the original. I'll definitely try the original, Danielle.
I feel like we'll probably respin this. What do you think? Like we'll respin this idea and we'll do more, like we'll do the bracelet someday because I need to see the bracelet.
Because I love that pattern and how you stacked it.
Thanks.
Danielle, we definitely have a good group of intermediate beaders today. So there hasn't been much on the sidebar there understanding your techniques. But this might be a good group for you to explain what's happening Friday, coming up class, because we're teaching a class, but you also have the what happens later on sample near you that I think this group would understand.
Oh, totally. I wonder if you guys have already heard of it. If you've ever heard of Kate McKinnon's group called Contemporary Geometric Beadwork, she was very gracious in allowing us to use one of her instructions for the triangle. If you've ever seen one of those stitched triangles, and if you haven't, you're in for a treat because it's really cool.
So this is our class next Friday.
Yeah. This is really fun. I just turned it into a necklace, super easy, basic necklace. So in class, we'll be primarily focusing on how to create that stitch triangle. It looks amazingly complex. I found it to be easier than I was expecting. It wasn't too bad because it's a lot of repeating. And so I did diagram it out in the handout, step by step, round by round by round. So you can see it, but even better is that the Contemporary Geometric Beadwork website has visual video. They have a video of the stitch. So it's like showing it an illustrated diagram, but with motion. Super easy to see where the thread's going and what it's doing. So there's so many options. And then of course, if you like having me to walk you through it, that's what I'm going to be doing next Friday. So super fun. And then if you're loving this, but we won't be able to teach this one because it would take many hours. But that triangle turns into one of these if you make a bunch of them and connect them. I had to try it myself to make the little flower. It's so pretty. This triangle, the difference you're seeing here in size is just because I kept going. Once you start the center, like, the beginning part of these triangles, you can keep making them bigger and bigger and bigger if you want to, and they'll get more and more like scoop shaped the further out you take it. This one is probably, I think, 3 or 4 rounds less than that. But I made 6 of them, or how many did I make? 1, 2, yeah, 6 of them to go around and create a little flower. And this pattern is, I actually copied the colors and everything from Kate McKinnon's website. So this is on her website. And again, she was really awesome to let us teach it. And so I'm excited to get to explore this and show you guys that. And then I don't have so I have the sample for the week after that, but the next class in April after the triangle, we're going to take one of our projects that was it's already on Michael's website and we already did a video, but I thought it'd be a cool class. So we're going to show how to do your basic leather wrap bracelet with a cool loom pattern inside. So for the loomers out there, you're going to love this one. This is really fun. And I've got my own kind of little spin on how to do it. It does use the Beadle tying station. So if you don't already have the tying station and you like the idea of trying it out, you can grab it. But there are other ways to do this with a clipboard. So if you don't have the tying station and you're not interested in it, a clipboard would be great in place of that. It'd be fine. And then last but not least, our next workshop is going to be 4-drop peyote. And I haven't finished this one yet because I want to use the sample in class to show the different things you can turn this into. Like, I think I'm, for me, going to make it a bracelet. So I might keep going out with more white. but this is how it's diagrammed in the pattern as a bookmark, because the original inspiration for it that we saw was a butterfly bookmark with a little tassel at the top. So I was going to show how to turn this into a bunch of different stuff, and the basic concept of how to read a pattern in peyote that treats 4 beads like 1 bead, which makes something like this looks like it took forever. But because each of these is 1 bead, essentially, each of these like sections, it goes a lot faster than you think. I probably made that in maybe 2 hours or so. It wasn't too bad. So I'll talk through that. And then I wrote the pattern special so that you don't have to, because often when you see a peyote pattern, it just tells you bead by bead by bead. Well, I broke them up into groups of 4. So you can see exactly what to pick up for every section to make it go even faster. And I might do another colorway because I feel like there needs to be a blue one and there needs to be a green one. And so I'll try to get that done too before that's our last class in April. And that's all 3 of the ones we've got coming up. And then, gosh, we even have the ones after that done too with the first 2 of those. So I'll bring those and show them to you guys next week.
I think you're awesome. A couple people have their camera on that you would be able to see them.
Oh yeah, let's turn that on. Let me switch to gallery. I usually have my own screen, so I can see if I'm going off camera. Let's see, gallery.
Oh my God.
Got a good group today. Hey guys.
Marguerite, did you finish? You finished. Yes, she did.
Oh,
Kylie's her. I see it in the bigger bead. Wow. That
is cool. You can really see the structure better with the bigger bead. I like that. I see Tracy's. Hi. Oh, cool. I see Monica's and Peggy. Oh, how cool. Wow, you guys are fast. Hey, Pat. Yeah. I see Michelle's. Hi, Michelle.
That's amazing. Now I want to do mine.
I want to go make the bracelet.
It's good to see Marguerite did make hers shorter, so it's nice to see hers as a different option for sure.
Oh, I like that.
There, it's on her clipboard.
Yeah, that's going to be about yay long because these are super long. They're shoulder duster. So yeah, definitely. I like that style too. Oh, cool.
Well, another Friday, Danielle, is gone.
I know, right? Where'd the week go? It's going so fast. I feel like it's just flying by. But it's a great way to end the week with you guys. So I always look forward to this, especially these classes where we get a little extra time together. So it's really fun. All right. Well, I just want to wish you guys a great weekend and happy beading. And if you wanted to share your earrings, take a photo of them and post them, we're at #JohnBead. And you can also tag #MakeItWithMichaels. And we always like to reshare and, cheer everybody on, see all the cool colorways you've chosen and spins and respins. So yeah, have a great weekend and wishing you lots of creativity. Bye, guys.